Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you today. I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Get involved in the conversation. And let's talk about Super Tuesday. Let's talk about Let Them Eat Flakes. Yes, the CEO of Kellogg's said that Americans who are facing this economic crisis, this tsunami, that more and more Americans are spending more and more money on groceries and they just cannot afford these groceries. He said, well, I tell you what you need to do is eat cornflakes or frosted flakes or Fruit Loops. I think they're great, but is that dinner? Where are we, everybody? And what's driving people to the polls or maybe away from the polls? Please meet me also on my Facebook page on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. I hope that you will meet me there. Santita Jackson and Friends is the only page where I am, everybody. Santita Jackson and Friends, not the Santita Jackson page. Many of you still trying to reach me there. You have to go to Santita Jackson and Friends. And thank you for wanting to be my friend. That really touches me greatly. And please tell everybody you can about the show on the YouTube channel, on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Like and subscribe and click the bell so that you can be notified every time we go live. So let's do that, everybody. And of course, meet me on X. I always want to call it Twitter, but Santita J is my handle, at Santita J and at Santita J Show. We're going to change that up a little bit, but at Santita J is where you can reach me. So let's talk about, in this first hour, Let Them Eat Flakes. One of the things that's got President Biden struggling is the economy. More people are working, but remember, in a slave economy, everybody works. Since COVID, we've been price gouged by corporations. Let's just put it where it is. And they have driven their prices further and further up. They're making more money than ever before. And we're paying the price. And we literally cannot afford food. We can't afford eggs. We cannot afford basic proteins. We cannot afford vegetables. We cannot afford fresh vegetables. We just cannot afford these groceries. And so the CEO of Kellogg's, who's a multimillionaire, whose base salary is $1 million a year, he makes several $1 million more per year in bonuses. Well, Gary Pilnick was on the Squawk Box. You've seen it on, I think it's Squawk on the Street on CNBC. Well, he got on and he said, let me tell you what you should do. You should eat cornflakes, Fruit Loops, Frosted Flakes, whatever it is. Eat cereal for dinner. What do you think about that? Many people said, wait a minute, including the interviewer, Carl Quintanilla, said, wait a minute, I don't know if that's going to land well with a lot of people who hear this. He gave him an opportunity, Attorney Mark Fancher, brilliant writer, civil libertarian, National Conference of Black Lawyers, and of course, Dwight McKee, Reverend Dr. Dwight McKee, social scientist and senior advisor to Dr. Cornel West in his presidential bid. He said, wait a minute, this is not going to land well. Well, Pilnick continued, the cereal category has always been quite affordable, and it tends to be a great destination when consumers are under pressure. If you think about the cost of cereal for a family versus what they might otherwise do, that's going to be more affordable. In fact, it's landing really well right now. He doubled down on it. He said cereal for dinner is something that is probably more on trend, and we would expect it to continue as that consumer is under pressure. Now, people on TikTok and social media went off, understandably. One user on TikTok said, this fool is making $4 million a year. Do you think he's feeding his kids cereal for dinner? Another user said, what the hell kind of dystopian hellscape is this? Give the peasants cereal for dinner. Some people are comparing him to, well, we don't quite know if Marie Antoinette said this, but she certainly is infamous before she was beheaded for saying, let them eat cake before, in the midst of the French Revolution. So let's talk about this. Dwight McKee, let them eat flakes.
Well, I think you have to also understand the context for it all, Santita. Kellogg's, Dr. Kellogg, who invented Kellogg's cornflake, was one of the first guys proponents of health, and he created the cornflake for nutritional reasons first. The diets back in that day were very, very, very poor. He actually had a health clinic where he would bring people in for months to heal their illnesses. And then he then integrated diet into that clinic, he and his brother. And it was an extension of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And they integrated that into their diet, and they have become probably the most healthy people in the world.
They are.
They have a vegetarian diet that is built around the Kellogg formula. And so I don't think it's just a matter of him being cavalier saying let them eat cake because they have nothing else to eat. I think it's an attempt to really change the mindset of the average consumer who think, including myself, who think the only proper diets are meat and potatoes and the things that are giving us most of the illness that we have. So I don't want to poo-poo it, but I think it has to be supplemented, not just with cornflakes, of course, but more healthy food, more supplementary food, more dietary food.
Because, I mean, to be fair, Dwight, of course, understanding that background, Frosted Flakes, Fruit Loops, et cetera, that's not healthy. And
Cornflakes, I'm not talking about Fruit
yeah,
Loops, and
but
I'm talking about cornflakes.
people are not checking for those cornflakes. And, and I think Mr. Pilnick was being dismissive. I think that he was. He did not stop to give you that history on CNBC. It sounded like let them eat flakes. And I think that I hear you. I think that you're right. And it's important for us to understand that history. But in a modern context, in which many of these CEOs are so insensitive, and when you're looking at people who are paying more for groceries than they have ever paid before in the history of the country, it doesn't land well.
Well, in loops, given the fact that the price of groceries will probably not go down soon, I think you have to look at options and what your options are and what healthy options can be. And I don't think that's an unhealthy option. That's all I'm saying. Even if he's cavalier in it, the reality is a lot of people are not going to be eating well and not going to be eating the processed food that they've been eating. And so as many healthy options that are on the table we should be willing to explore.
What do you think, uh, Mark Fancher?
Well, I think on this issue, I'm a lot more cynical than Dwight. I think that there is so much about this which is offensive. Um, and I acknowledge that history of the Kellogg Company, but we're not living in a time of famine. It is not as though there is a shortage of food. It is the question of how much it costs. And if, in fact, he were sincere, which I don't think he was, then and he was really trying to be helpful, and if he really thought that cereal was an adequate replacement for nutritional dinner food, then what he would say is Kellogg is going to lead the way by reducing the prices of cereal substantially so that everybody can afford enough of it to ensure that they are properly nourished and sustained. But the fact is that not only has cereal progressed beyond just the cornflakes in it, it's now basically candy in a box. But also they have that have raised the prices of cereal so that in a practical sense, the cost of cereal sometimes is greater than the cost of eating what is regarded as traditional nutritional food, vegetables and meat and even some frozen products. Uh, but I think that what really is going on, and I don't even know that he was just being dismissive, I think that he was being very calculating
Mm.
in that uh, the market for cereal has probably been diminishing over time because There are so many other breakfast options that have become available to people. Everything from McDonald's and fast food breakfast options to toaster kinds of breakfasts. The microwave has made all kinds of things possible for people that were not possible in the past in terms of grabbing something quickly. And so they have, as a company, likely been looking for ways to expand the market and to try and increase demand for it. And so this campaign, Eat Cereal for Dinner, by their own acknowledgement, is not something new. It's been around for, if I read it correctly, at least a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that his advocating this now is not necessarily triggered by complaints about Biden or the economy or anything right now at this moment, but is an opportunistic effort to try and advance a campaign that has been underway for quite some time. But more generally, I just think that it is yet another example of just how crude and how offensive and repulsive capitalism is as a system. That companies would be willing to exploit hardship and difficulty in order to enrich the company and to make profits. Because I don't know the inner workings of Kellogg and its budget and all of that, but I would be willing to bet that they've marked up the price substantially. Their
Mhm.
margins are probably incredible. I can't believe that it costs them anything close to $5 and $6 a box to produce a box of this stuff that they call cereal.
Or $10 for the family box.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, we have been, I mean, now President Biden today announced that he is about to have, I won't call it a commission, but certainly a coming together on dealing with corporations and price gouging. Because more and more people are aware of the fact that they are making money hand over fist. They have been since COVID. And we're the ones who are paying the price. And there's no justification for the way they've raised these prices. Dwight McKee,
Well,
Mark.
until we have a corporate assault on Monsanto, who controls the food market, who has patented the seeds, so nobody else can plant in anything that they have the patent on. They are the ones behind. They are the real culprits behind the food shortage. Monsanto controls most of the production of the food
Mhm.
around the country, and so there has to be. And I totally agree. You know, Mark, I don't disagree with you at all. But there has to be across the board assault on companies, on these monopolies like Monsanto. Um, I don't put flakes, Kellogg's flakes in the same category. I do the other food stuff only because it was really founded to be nutritious. It was founded as an alternative to meat and potatoes. And Dr. Kellogg was one of the first ones in the world to really put an emphasis on diet and nutrition. And so I don't think that context is the same as the folk who then, the Post and the other companies that, like you said, they just putting sugar in the box. You know, I look at the 7 Day Adventist, and he was one of the co-founders of Kellogg. Was the sister that founded the 7 Day Adventist movement. Um, and 7 Day Adventists, when you study that culture, they are among the healthiest in the world,
There's
all
no
over the
question.
world.
There's no question about that. But as Mr. Quintanilla, who was interviewing him on CNBC, said, this is not going to land properly. Because, number one, Dwight, I mean, and I hear you. I mean, I think that you're absolutely right. I have a lot of friends who are Seventh-day Adventists, and they're the healthiest people I know. And with good reason. That having been said, that's not where he was coming from. That's not the way it landed. It certainly didn't land that way with me. And unless we're going to deal with corporate greed, and you're right, and Monsanto and the genetic engineering of our food, this is what The way this landed gives us an opportunity to look at all of that. But in the wealthiest nation on earth, which is what we're constantly told that America is, the wealthiest nation on earth, we live in abundance. For people to have cornflakes, there's something about that to me that it just doesn't land well. And I'm like Mark, I look at this far more cynically, because I think these people are not. I don't think that they care about people's health.
As opposed to chickens without mothers and fathers.
No, I'm saying
I mean, what's the alternative?
no, I'm saying all of it. But I'm starting here with someone who makes at least $5 million a year, who said in a moment when people are struggling to buy groceries, well, you should eat cornflakes. And yes, this is trending. It just didn't land properly. This is what Dr. Julianne Malveaux wrote. Let them eat flakes, inflation, nutrition, and reality. Dr. Julianne Malveaux, the famed economist. We were trying to get her today, but we've had some technical issues. She wrote, remember the parable of the blind men and the elephant? As each approached an elephant and tried to describe it, they came up with wildly disparate answers. One thought it a snake, another a tree, another a trunk. Because they were blind, they could not see the big picture. They described the part of the elephant they could touch. She continued, inflation is something like that. People describe it based on the way it hits them, and it hits each family differently. Those with incomes below the median salary of $56,420 per year are hit hardest and most likely counting their pennies. Those with higher incomes shrug off some of the ways that inflation hurts. But make no mistake, it hurts. Grocery prices are up by 25% in the past 4 years, COVID. And to be sure, inflation is waning, but groceries continue to increase in price. And inflation, as she continues, reminds us how disparate our lives are. Then a corporate CEO, Gary Pilnick, who earned at least $4.9 million a year as CEO of Kellogg, offered a novel solution. Let them eat cereal, he says. Really? Cereal, he says, is nutritious and delicious. And it's also relatively cheap. And people did compare him to Marie Antoinette. And a 13 box serving of Kellogg's sugar frosted flakes cost $18.70, about $1.45 a serving. 6 ounces of milk costs about 40 cents. I think we got Dr. Malveaux back here. I want her to explain what she wrote. And how did this land on you, Dr. Malveaux?
Well, when I heard this, man, I was cracking up. I truly was. I'm like, it was like Marie Antoinette, let them eat flakes, especially when you think about the highest rated Kellogg cereals having so much sugar in them and the issues we have in our community with diabetes, high blood pressure, and other things. Sure, it's more expensive, probably another $1 more expensive to give your child a chicken leg, some mashed potatoes, and some green beans. But it's much more nutritious. And we know all the correlations between what you eat and how you perform, how you show up at school the next day. So I just thought there was the height of arrogance, but also the height of myopia. You don't see what you can't touch. And this man could not touch his customers. So very glibly, oh, yeah, they can have flakes. Very, very glibly. But this is why our country is so divided, because we have such varied experiences. The mom who's earning 50 grand a year or less is struggling. The CEO who's making 5 mil is not. If the price of his porterhouse goes up by a couple pennies, he doesn't even notice it. But if the price of milk or eggs, and egg prices have been crazy, or any of the other staples that our basic families depend on, they notice, they pinch, they say, oh my, they went to the store a year ago and spent $110 and now they spent $125. And that makes a difference. So I don't understand corporate CEO think, but then again, I do. These people are not living for America, and they don't understand the ways that so many people live.
Well, Dwight was making the point, and Dwight, why don't you make your point once more to give us some background once again on Dr. Kellogg, and maybe that will make that. I don't know how that will land on
Well, I'm
you, Dr. Kellogg.
separating Kellogg's Corn Flakes from other breakfast cereal. I'm saying it's unique in that Dr. Kellogg, who designed it as a healthy alternative to the food that people were eating, that he noticed began to drive up this disease in people. And so he set a clinic up that people could go and get healthy in the clinic. It was one of the first clinics of its kind in the world where poor people and rich people could go to treat their disease. And as part of the treatment process, he invented a food product that he was nutritious, that didn't cost a lot of money. And so Kellogg comes out of that. He also was working directly with, and he himself was a Seventh-day Adventist. And so his first market was the Adventist market. And he took them psychologically and culturally into a direction of being vegetarians. And today they are among the most healthy people in the world. Most of inflation, I totally agree with Sister Malvo and Brother Mark, is created by corporate greed. And we have to attack corporate greed and the monopoly of companies like Monsanto, who not only control the food stuff, they also control all of the seeds now. So you can't even plant new seed unless they okay it. They have patents on it. You can't even grow your own seed in some cases, and they've taken over the farmland. And so I think that if we were going to put energy into reacting, we'd have to react to a company like Monsanto, which is a bigger reason behind the inflation and the domination of food stuff, as opposed to focus on somebody like Kellogg, who had the best of intentions. Now, he was probably wrong the way he put that together,
Yeah.
but I do have to make a separation and say that it is at least a healthy alternative to chickens now, which don't have parents, and eggs, which are made in the laboratory. And we have no idea the kind of food we eat today, how it's being processed and where it's coming from.
We don't know that
Well,
about
Brother
Kellogg's
McKee, let
cornflakes
me just
either.
say this. Whatever the intentions that Dr. Kellogg had, these were decades ago. Mr. Finklin, the CEO of Kellogg now, does not have such good intentions. So while you may want to enshrine this company, and I don't know that history, I'll have to look it up. But while we can say there were good intentions somewhere along the way, what we have to say is those good intentions have backfired. I don't think that anybody can justify a bowl of cereal that has 20 grams of sugar in it. That's not holistic eating. So whatever happened in the past is not happening now.
Well, you know what? We've got Carlos Rodriguez from the Poor People's Campaign of Illinois with us. How you doing, Carlos? And of course,
I'm well. Thanks for your patience with me getting onto the show.
oh no, thank you, thank you for really making this.
Carlos, you just got here 1 minute after me. It's been
What? Oh,
challenging-
that's good to know.
it's been
Yeah.
a challenging technology afternoon.
Okay, look, this is the way it works when you're doing live broadcast. It is what it is, and we have to keep it going. But before we get to you, Carlos, when can we hear you on the radio, Dr. Malvo?
Monday mornings at 9 a.m. WPFW FM, stream live WPFWFM.org. And great news on Monday, I'll be talking to Teresa Galaducci, who has written a book called Retire. She's writing about retirement and how it's not permanent, how so many people who retire come back into the labor market. She's a colleague of mine from the Economic Policy Institute, brilliant economist who's really been looking at these retirement issues for a long time. And a lot of people can't retire.
At all. Well, all you have to do is drive through the fast food, and you see grandma and grandpa in there are in there working. It breaks my heart. Breaks my heart. Carlos Rodriguez, when you hear, and Dwight McKee, and I thank you for giving us this history, but I still think Mr. Pilnick, he was very insensitive because it's the context in which he shared that, we should have cereal, in this land of plenty. It was just something about that that just didn't land correctly to me. And absolutely, we need to look at GMO, all of these. The fact is now people are catching even a case about growing your own vegetables in your backyard. You're right, Dwight. All of that is happening all over the country. That having been said, we're not being, First Lady Michelle Obama tried to encourage us to grow, to have our own gardens and whatnot, but he didn't give us any of that history. It just sounded like let them eat cake, let them eat flakes. It did not sound right when you have got poverty at the highest levels that we have seen in 50 plus years. When you see people cannot afford to get the basics, to really have to get basic healthy food from the grocery store. Carlos Rodriguez, Illinois Poor People's Campaign, fourth leading cause of death in the United States is poverty. What did you make of these remarks?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it was insensitive at best, and actually profiting off of poverty at worst. I grew up in a culture that was real clear about basically what is a healthy diet. We call it eating the three sisters, right? This is what my abuelita, my grandma, taught me. The three sisters are corn, squash, and beans. Right? And that has all your nutrient. I think I caught at the end that Mr. McKee was talking about how these, for example, Kellogg's they're in the business of selling processed food. They take out all the nutrients, and this man makes $1 million a year with $4 million in bonuses, and he don't have to worry about that, right? And for him to make a statement like that just really angers me, right? Especially with this epidemic of diabetes and obesity in our community, which lead to heart issues. But the other piece I guess I want to say is that, when you think about what a corporation's job is to do is increase profits for its stockholders, right? We're not looking at the overall implications of these decisions, right, that we make, especially when it comes to food production. So I've said a lot already, but my ears started turning red when you first invited me, and I started thinking, really, this is what this guy is saying, especially given the fact that they've moved up the prices of their product, right, without any thinking about how it impacts our communities, right? Especially, I don't know if you've been to the grocery store lately, but you're paying a lot of money for groceries, and I'm just lucky that I'm stably employed.
Oh, I mean, and you're not buying proteins, and you can look up, and you have spent close to $100, and you have to wonder, what did I just buy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let me say, Santita, Carlos has a really good point about the prices, because the other thing is that food prices have gone up, but cereal prices have gone up even more than food prices. So, and they're doing this thing, I forget what they call it, where you put less food in the same size box.
Oh yeah.
And then, so anyway, his whole thing is beyond self-serving. It's the height of arrogant predatory capitalism. The height of arrogant predatory capitalism, to act as if he cares about people. Oh, just have some cereal. I don't have chick nor child, but when my godchild comes over, he gets himself a nice little piece of meat. He gets a rice and potatoes. He gets some veggies, and a little Kool-Aid, or actually fizzy water, because we don't do Kool-Aid anymore. But he gets a serious meal. And what young people need to do before they go to school, the night before, they need to have a rib-sticking meal. And cereal is not a rib-sticking meal.
Oh, no, yeah. Can I wanted to add this too. I looked this up before we got on. Did you know that Kellogg's made $14.2 billion in profit in 2021? And that was only the cereal side. On the snack side, where they have all that junk stuff, they made $11.4 billion in snacks. Yet they moved up the prices still, even though the product itself, standing by itself is not nutritious at all. So yeah, this is the ultimate form of callousness, and this is coming from somebody who grew up with cornflakes too. My Puerto Rican brothers and sisters, if they're listening to the show, they love their cornflakes con café. In other words, they would put coffee into the cornflakes to eat it, even putting it into the babies' bottles. But yeah, it's like, come on now, by the way, here's a side point, but I think this goes to the same point. This predatoriness, especially when it comes to going after poor and low wealth communities, has got a long history in this country. The Nestle's Corporation back in the 50s convinced all these women in Puerto Rico that breastfeeding was wrong and they should use infant formula. And there were hundreds of thousands of children that lost their lives because the women were not breastfeeding. And it's just shameful when we get this kind of ignorant information that gets put out. So,
well, they did that with women of color everywhere. And then you saw white women breastfeeding, because we were bestial, if you will, because we were breastfeeding. This was, white women were too delicate to do that, just historically. I mean, it's way off. Mark, I mean, where do we go from here? What does it say about our value system? Because I don't see an expansion in programs giving people. I mean, Dwight, you knew my grandmother, Mrs. Gertrude Brown. She was a vegetarian and had been a vegetarian for 40 plus years. And ate, I guess, she ate like someone who was Seventh-day Adventist, but the fact that she ate in an old traditional Black way. She ate a lot of, because she was a migrant worker as a child, and in her youth, she would take us to Whole Foods and show us how to find the beans. My brother Jonathan, who's in Congress now, has a video of her going through and showing us how to get beans, because she picked beans. And then we went over to some more vegetables. She said, no, not that one. You want this one. And so, and my mother has a vegetable garden at their home. It just doesn't feel like he was coming from this healthy place. And I don't see our government trying to get Americans to a healthy place, Mark.
No, and I don't think it says anything about us. I think it speaks volumes about corporate culture and the exploitative nature of the capitalist system generally. As I said earlier, I think that this was not a man who was ignorant. It wasn't a man who was disinterested or dismissive. I think it was part of a cold, calculated, opportunistic plan to exploit hardship. And it's not unusual. It happens in a lot of industries. I think that the oil industry is one of the best examples of it. I mean, you can just see it from year to year. Oil prices go down during periods when people are not expected to be on the road. And then all of a sudden, the prices of gas goes through the roof as we approach holiday weekends, as we approach holiday seasons. And then when asked about it, the oil companies always say, well, we've got supply line problems. We've got conflict in the Middle East that's causing. They come up with all kinds of excuses, but it's a cold, calculated effort to exploit the circumstances that the rest of us are going through at any given time. And I think that here we've got a corporate executive who's trying to, in his mind, fulfill his fiduciary responsibility to his stockholders by increasing profits. And he is continuing to push a campaign that's been around for a while to try and expand the use of breakfast cereal into other parts of the day so that they can get people to buy more cereal and increase profits. And I don't think that for one moment they even entertain the thought of being charitable or benevolent. But hypothetically, if they chose to be, given the billions of dollars that this company makes and other companies make, and they honestly perceived that there was a food emergency in this country, there are so many other things that they could do other than to tell people to just go and buy cereal for dinner. As I said earlier, they could cut the cost of their product. They could come together and they could make honestly nutritious food available on a mass basis through an exercise of good corporate citizenship. They could engage in nutritional educational programs. They could provide donations and funding to many of these urban farming projects that are sprouting up throughout the country, where people are trying to take growing healthy food into their own hands by starting small farms on plots of land. There are similar kinds of projects in the South that young people have started. There are all kinds of things that they could do which would demonstrate that they were sincere and that they were really trying to make a difference in terms of the nutritional, the availability of nutrition to people and the health of people in this country. But just simply to say, buy more of our product at its current price does not in any way suggest any type of sincere effort to address an emergency. It's simply, greed and opportunism, and it's crass. And I think further reason, if we need any, for us to destroy the capitalist system.
Dwight, what prescription would you write? I mean, I think that you're right. I think that we need to look at. I mean, we need to look at our food production system, because it does drive unhealthiness. It does. And then you've got Bill Gates and others who are buying up huge swaths of land, and they're controlling the farmland, and they're trying to give us food that's not healthy. That's processed. I mean, and these are people, Carlos, who really feel, Dr. Malvo and Mark Fanchuk, that there are too many people on Earth. I mean, it's just very sinister, but it's real off.
And that's why I was saying that if we're going to focus on energy, that's who I would be focusing energy on. All of the companies do the same thing in terms of trying to get people to buy their product. That's what capitalism is, as Mark always talks about. So you're going to find that in every company, even those we would qualify as nutritious. But the fact of the matter is that if we were going to mount an initiative, I would not mount an initiative against a Kellogg who, even if they become corrupt, started with the best intentions.
Oh.
I would be more inclined to focus on the Monsantos and the Bill Gates and those who are manufacturing food stuff that is really, in many instances, even cannot be qualified as food stuff, because they're just chemicals rearranged and flavored to taste like food.
Well, I don't disagree. With that, but
Santita,
as you come in, Dr. Malvo, I think this though gives us an opportunity to do that. It's just like focusing on one particular product to boycott. The system itself is rotten, but somebody says something that opens the door, and I think that he's opened the door. Dr. Malvo.
couple things. First of all, I have no sympathy whatsoever for the history of Kellogg. None whatsoever. Many of these companies, you can look at the Ford Corporation, when Henry Ford said he wanted to make cars affordable so more people would buy them. Capitalists always figure out something in their own self-interest, and it's foolish of us to think or to ascribe them with any benevolence. I think that Franklin has given us an open door to, if we should, take Kellogg down to their knees. Say, how dare you tell people that cereal is a acceptable substitute to the meal you had last night? Did you have cereal for dinner? And the answer to that would be no. So I have no sympathy. But more broadly, what my point of agreement with Dwight is this. We're looking at poverty in the United States. Dr. King once said, there are 40 million poor people here. Why do we have 40 million poor people in America? Here's the question we have to ask. I'm paraphrasing him slightly. He said, who owns oil? Who owns iron ore? If the world is 2/3 water, why do we pay water bills? Why aren't we involved in a massive anti-poverty movement that talks about the many ways that the poor are being exploited? Yes, who does own the oil, the iron ore, the gasoline? Mark made a point earlier about oil executives and the ways that they manipulate prices. Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, prices are going to go up by at least 20 cents a gallon. Then when the demand slows down, the prices will go back down. They're exploiting. And what has to happen, and I have to lift up Reverend William Barber, my brother and my friend, who really is talking about poverty in ways we haven't heard it talked about in a very long time. Bringing people together, white folk, black folk, Asians, Latinos, people who are experiencing poverty. And make no mistake, the majority of America, at least the bottom 40%, when you say the bottom 40%, you've got to cringe. The bottom 40%, that means damn near everybody, excuse my language. But when the bottom 40% are experiencing a set of common problems about affordability, housing is a huge issue. And just like the companies are buying up swaths of land for agricultural production, they're also buying up blocks of private homes in cities and suburbs to exploit in terms of rents. That's why rents keep going up, even though we see a number of other things going down. And so, yes, I would use Kellogg as an example, because in the boycott technology, you have to have a scapegoat. And Kellogg has made themselves an acceptable scapegoat. But I think the broader issue is how we collectively fight poverty and articulate that it is utterly unacceptable for children in these United States to go to bed hungry. We have a hunger issue. And Mr. Franklin blew it away by saying, eat cereal. The real issue is how come mama and daddy can't afford chicken, or I hate to say hot dogs because they nasty, but hot dogs or some form of meat, starch, vegetable that our young people need for their own development and survival.
Carlos, that resonated with you.
Yeah, it really did. The truth is that millions of poor people in the U.S. today are poor because the wealth and resources of our country have been flowing to a small number of people. That's all there is to it. I mean, untold profits were made during COVID. I made that point the other day. In July of 2020, our U.S. Congress passed a military budget of $860 billion, right? And this is where a lot of poor and low wealth people were having to shelter in place. They could have easily taken care of people at home to keep them safe, to keep us all safe. But I think obviously I'm among friends right here. I mean, we get it that it's a system that's hurting us. The bottom line is that profit rules the day, and we're going to have to do a lot of organizing and mobilizing to educate people about how this system really works. And the numbers are clear, right? If we're able to even register 10% of poor and low wealth people and get them out there to vote, it could change the political landscape of this country, right? And that's why I joined the Poor People's Campaign. I recognize that strategy, and also the piece is that it's got to be done through education simultaneously with registering people. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Dwight?
Yeah, and I'm saying that 60% of trillion dollar budget goes to the military. The $2 million go for every bomb you drop. So you making your focus on cornflakes, I think it misses the point of what's really happening in the economy. It's let us eat cake. That opened up an opportunity too. And then the opportunity opened up as they cut Marie Antoinette's head off and her husband's head off. But also coming out of that was the French Revolution and the war of the terror, reign of terror for 15 years, and Napoleon and the European wars. So you have to always be careful of unintended consequences. I would rather, if we're going to focus some energy, we would focus on those things that are having the maximum impact on the economy and the maximum impact on health food, on the food stuff, which again is Monsanto. and and again is the military industrial complex budget for that. If we're gonna march, let's march against that.
But I'm not disagreeing
So
with
you
you.
can put your
I'm saying,
hands.
but Dr. Malvo, I'm not disagreeing with you. But Marie Antoinette, that opened the door to the French Revolution, which opened the door to which allowed the Enlightenment to shine through too. I mean, because you had the reign of terror, but you also had freedom and liberty, which got a new voice. You ended monarchies. That also happened too. That was a consequence as well. This gives us an opportunity to look at a system. I'm saying, Dr. Malvo.
You know, Dwight can have Monsanto. I'm not. What people? What if you do movement work? What you have to understand is what people can glom onto, put their hands on, become relatable. What's relatable is some fool who says let them eat flakes. Monsanto, a mega agricultural corporation, is not so relatable. You can't put your hands on that. Yes, we could connect all these things. The military industrial complex also is not that relatable to folks who are not looking at the broader economy. You're absolutely right that the military industrial complex is exploitive, takes up too much of our budget. Half of our federal budget, more than half, goes to the so-called, I call the Department of Offense as opposed to defense. But if we can drill down on this comment, drill down to say, this is what wealthy predatory capitalists think of y'all. They had steak last night, asparagus, little rice, had dessert, but you're supposed to have flakes. I think that that's what part of the challenges I think with some of our movements is that we don't drill it down to make it something that somebody who's not an intellectual, not a commentator, just someone who's trying to put some food on her table, something that she can deal with. This is why I think the work that Reverend Barber is doing is so incredibly important because he breaks it down. When he starts with the flakes comment, he can build it up to the point that we get to the military industrial complex. But if I'm talking to a sister, I was at Whole Foods this morning and they handed over a little cash, and the sister was saying, "Can you believe these prices?" I mean, and we had a short conversation about activism, but she's like, "Can you believe these prices? I'm going to have to put something back." I said, "Don't put them back. I got you." And we walked out and we had a conversation. She ain't thinking about Monsanto. Even if I tell her who Monsanto is, she's thinking about the fact that she can't figure out how to feed her babies, 3 of them. And that's how we have to make the movement touchy-feely. And that's what Dr. King did. That's what Reverend Jackson has done. And that's what we have to do as the inheritors of their dream. We have to train those who come behind us to do the same thing.
Stay tuned for the second hour as we talk about Super Tuesday. What are the issues driving people to the polls, away from the polls? What about uncommitted? People now have an option. They can go to the polls and they can vote uncommitted. What's happening? The economy, all of this we'll be talking about in the second hour with John Nichols of The Nation magazine and this wonderful panel. Not everybody here, but certainly panel. And so I'm really glad that we're going to be able to do that because this really is a continuation because in election 2024, Mark Fancher, these are the issues that we need to be talking about. Literally bread and butter issues.
Well, I think so, but also I think given our discussion up to now, I think what we also need to really seriously think about is moving away from being election oriented, from reacting to these kinds of situations and thinking that what we need to do is to make demands on a system and expect it to respond. It will not respond. It has been constructed in a way that enables this type of corporate conduct. And I think that rather than thinking about trying to make it respond, we need to think about what we can build. We need to think about how we can begin to completely separate ourselves from the system, from everything that's been set up, and start from scratch and build a new system. Jesus and the first Christians did it. We can do it too. And it can begin with something as simple as trying to figure out ways for us to feed ourselves, and at the same time, destroying a system which has been exploiting and oppressing us historically since it's been around.
Carlos, I've got another couple minutes here.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I actually want to challenge what you're saying, and let me tell you why. You know, although I agree with a lot of what you're saying, I think we need to use everything at our disposal. And what I'm trying to say is, Americans think of politics as elections, right? We should be in that arena, duking it out with people, right, and amplifying these voices of folks and framing things for people to understand. I think people go to our churches, and that's where they seek guidance and spirituality. We need to be there, right? Folks are at schools, right? How can we get to folks that are helping to work with our parents, working in the communities? Again, I'm trying to think strategically, right? I mean, again, I agree with you with what you're saying, but I also know that whatever way it gets expressed, we've got to be firmly familiar with what we could consider like American forms of revolution here. You know what I'm saying? And I think we're saying that there needs to be a revolution of values, right? We've been talking a lot in the Poor People's Campaign about that we need a resurrection, a moral resurrection, not an insurrection. And the idea is that we got to flip things on its head and recognize that people they've got natural instincts to what's right. They're just being misled. But we have to be in there to put that counterpoint into place so that they won't attack each other, and because they use these divide and conquer tactics all the time. And I'm
Yeah,
not about
I just say that the system is rigged. It is futile to try and reform it. It has to be destroyed. And we can strategically use it, like as in the uncommitted campaign, but we can't expect that it's going to resolve these kinds of problems.
Well, and rebuild, because you don't want to end at destruction, right? We want
That's right.
to rebuild and build a more perfect union and build a perfect union. That is a promise. That is a promise. I love you, everybody. Stay tuned for the second hour of Keep Hope. Gee whiz. This is what happens when you're on 7 days a week. The Santita Jackson Show, everybody. But I am trying to keep hope alive. Back on the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Back in a minute.